Hello, Nashville. This is Bo Beach. You are listening to the Free Speech podcast where we are going to discuss Nashville commercial real estate news, politics, culture, and even a little bit of sports sprinkled in. We are bringing this to you in a casual, authentic style, which is why I'm dressed the way I'm dressed. We're going to talk as if we're buddies in a room, kind of just chopping it up, right? So, what I want to do for you first is go over what we're going to cover in today's show. First, we're going to talk about one of the more creative users of commercial real estate in the Nashville area. Believe it or not, Vanderbilt Medical Center, which I'll explain to you in just a moment. We're going to talk about one of the more interesting hotel deals going down in Nashville right now, the Dolly Hotel. Very interesting transaction. One of the highest priced office deal sales of the last year was actually bought to be converted to a hotel. We'll get into that. We're going to talk about the phase 2 of the airport expansion and what that means for greater Nashville and our ability to continue to attract reputable corporate relocations. We're going to talk about the Nashville office pipeline, right? So there's a lot of doom and gloom in the market regarding office space. I'm going to give you kind of a my no-nonsense opinion on what that looks like in Nashville and whether or not that's really a problem here. Then we're going to get a little bit weird, something I've been thinking about rather, karma, right? And the idea is as I get older, I believe more and more in the idea of karma, and I've chosen to live my life that way. And I'm going to present some ideas for your consideration there. We're going to talk about something that I've been thinking a lot about lately is, if our 50 states, which make up our union of states, right, the United States of America, root word union, the United States of America, what if we collectively decided that it's no longer working for us and it's time to split up, right? What would that look like? And I'll give you a hint. I don't think war is necessary. We're going to talk about why restaurants in Nashville are down 30% year over year. And that's going to bring us into more discussion about consumer confidence, right? I'm going to give you the updated statistics on consumer confidence and my take there. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the transit plan that's being pitched, that's going to be voted on in November along with the presidential election. I'm going to give you a little history lesson there, and I'm going to give you my take on why this isn't truly a transit plan, but perhaps more of a transit welfare plan, right, as I see it. So that's what we're going to talk about in today's show. Let's start at the top with Vanderbilt Medical Center. So generally speaking, hospital systems, and this is Nashville's largest hospital system, mind you, are not the most creative users of real estate. They're generally ground up folks, right, where they buy land, they build their customized property out of the ground. They stay there forever. The challenge is in the Nashville area, there's just not a whole lot of property that one can buy and do that, right? So what's happened is our largest hospital system, Vanderbilt Medical Center, has gotten very creative. And they've historically been creative. Their most recent deal in Brentwood may be the most creative of it all, right? So in Brentwood, there's a property at 402 Franklin Road, right? It is the AT&T data center. Right, so my understanding is AT&T has decommissioned this data center, but if you've never been in a data center, it's not real usable space. It's not set up to be used by people. Rather, it's set up to be used by machines, right? Machines that create a lot of heat, and it's really about keeping the machines cool and protecting them from any type of damage that they might incur. It's really got absolutely nothing to do with people and certainly nothing to do with a medical use. Nevertheless, Vanderbilt Medical Center just signed a long-term ground lease for this property. Now let me put in perspective for you how big this property is. 43 acres with 348,000 square feet of existing building space, right? They've done this because they're going to convert this existing decommissioned data center to a new medical use. Now, Vanderbilt Medical Center has done this before, right? One of the best examples that we'll talk about is Vanderbilt Health at 100 Oaks, right? So 100 Oaks is a shopping center, a shopping mall, if you will. Vanderbilt purchased that property and converted the bulk of it to their own use, their own medical use. There's still some retail uses there, but nevertheless, they repositioned that property to be a medical use, which is really creative, and you do not see that often. You don't see medical centers, hospital systems approaching commercial real estate in a creative way like Vanderbilt Medical Center has. So this is a very, very big deal for Brentwood. I would tell you that the folks in Brentwood would much prefer a nearby medical center as opposed to a data center, which they don't truly benefit from in any way. So, you got to give props to Vanderbilt Medical Center for the creativity in which they pursue their commercial real estate deals. Now let's talk about the Dolly Parton Hotel that's coming downtown. I'm not sure they've actually put a name to it yet. Obviously Dolly Parton is very much involved in the hotel business, which has kind of been a spin-off of her Dollywood Resorts in East Tennessee. She's making a big push, her and her investors group, right? Making a big push into downtown Nashville. They've acquired 211 Commerce, which was built in 2000. This is a state-of-the-art office property, a glass and steel office tower. I would argue that if you were going to build an office building today, you would build it exactly the way they built this property, right? So this is not functionally obsolete. This is not a location that no longer works. The highest bidder simply was an investors group who wants to convert this state-of-the-art office building to an 11-story hotel tower, right? So what they've done is they've started the full gut of 9 of those 11 stories, right? Well, why only 9 of the 11 stories? Well, one, they're not demolishing the ground floor, right? Which makes sense. The ground floor has 2 existing tenants that are signed to leases, obviously, but these tenants are also going to benefit the hotel users, right? So Black Tap is one of those tenants. They're a New York City-based concept that serves burgers and shakes, and then of course First Watch, which is I would describe as a breakfast provider. So the first floor is spared, but the other story that's been spared is another interesting little tidbit. There are 2 existing smaller tenants in that building that have lease left, so they're actually going to demolish this building, the interior of the building rather. They're going to demolish the interior of this building and work around those 2 existing tenants while they wait out those leases. I don't know if you've ever been involved with something like that. I certainly have. I've sold office buildings that were being converted to other uses. Generally, it's apartments. In this case, it's a hotel. And back in those days, I actually owned a property management company, so I was the guy actually dealing with the tenants and trying to keep everybody happy while we demolished all of the floors that were uninhabited while waiting out the leases for those that were inhabited. And it is a very, very tricky thing to keep everyone happy. And if you are going to take a skeptical view of that scenario, many folks in that situation are going to make it untenable for those tenants. And that's a unfortunate play on words there, but they're going to make it painful to stay in that building. It's going to be a different experience than they were used to, and kind of the quality of their tenancy is going to go way down, and perhaps they will negotiate an out to get out of that building to spare themselves from, the challenges that are ahead of them when trying to operate a business from a tower that's being demolished and rebuilt on the inside. I will tell you that the cost of demolishing just the interior of those 9 floors, just hollowing them out, $500,000. So you're into it for $75 million, another $500,000 a demo, and then you start building back that hotel build out, which is one of the most expensive build outs in commercial real estate. So they're going to have a lot of money in this hotel, but when it gets done, I'm sure it's going to be very, very cool, very, very popular. And, I salute them for this project as well. So the first 2 topics of today's show are about adaptive reuse, right? Which simply means buying a property and adapting it to a new use. Now let's move on to the airport expansion, right? So the airport expansion is important for our region economically, from a business standpoint, because many of these large corporations that are relocating here have clients and executives all over the country. They need to be able to come to their home base very easily. So the more effective your local airport, the easier it is to attract corporate relocations. And we are lucky in Nashville to have a very, very well-run airport, right? The first phase of that airport expansion is now complete. They spent $1.5 billion with a billion dollars, right? And what do we get for that? We got an on-site hotel. We've got parking structures, new parking structures with 7,000 parking spaces. And we got a 200,000 square foot grand lobby, which you've probably experienced if you have been to the airport recently, right? So now let's talk about the second phase. We're going from 1.5 billion in the first stage to 2.1 billion in the second phase, right? We're going from 54 gates all the way up to 70 gates. That just means more flights. All of those additional gates are already spoken for by the existing airlines that operate out of the airport. They are going to rebuild and expand Concourse A. They are going to extend Concourse D. They are going to add another parking garage, right? Which isn't necessary now, but they are projecting Nashville's growth into the future and anticipating that parking will be necessary in the future. They're also planning to expand capacity of their baggage handling service to accommodate these additional gates. They're doing all of this with no taxpayer funding, right? They get their money from the rent they charge airlines, from the rent they charge the establishments inside the airport that are selling you overpriced goods and services. They get their funding from fees that they charge. And one of the big ones is the parking, right? So they own all of the parking on the airport, and that is just cash money coming to the airport. And that's really what's funding these expansions. They're also taking on some debt that they pay back through bonds and whatnot. But the majority of it's being paid for by rent, fees, and parking, which is best case scenario, right? The taxpayer is not subsidizing these expansions, which is what we should really be looking to be doing in all of these type of community amenities, in my opinion. So the moral to the story here is we are really getting it right on the airport, and salute to those guys. All right, let's talk quickly about the Nashville office pipeline, right? So across the country, office development has come to a screeching halt, right? That's not necessarily true in Nashville because we're insulated from a lot of the pain that they're feeling nationwide because we've got so much growth. We've got so much demand to be here, especially from large corporate tenants who are by far the biggest users of office space. You know, you've got the Amazons, the Oracles. We've got 2 million square feet of office buildings in construction today, right? And it's going to take 1 to 3 years, right, to really get an office building out of the ground. So it takes some time. 1/3 of that 2 million square feet is already pre-leased to tenants which is very important, right? And if you're not in the business of commercial real estate, you probably don't realize that it's very difficult to finance ground up new development without pre-leasing. So if you can get 1/3 of that 2 million square feet pre-leased, it makes it much easier to finance and get those projects actually completed. The problem is the pipeline is now diminishing, right? There haven't been a whole lot of new office building starts over the last 18 months due to rising interest rates and rising construction costs, right? So now, if anything, in Nashville, we are fearing that we are going to be underbuilt in the future and will not be able to accommodate the corporate relocations that we seek, right? So it's opposite of what you're seeing in most other metro areas across the country. So it's a good problem to have, right? I would say around our house, I would say these are champagne problems, right? Which just means these are good problems. Another interesting dynamic happening with the office building market in Nashville is we're seeing companies, the larger users, relocate out of the downtown core away from Broadway. And why are they doing that? Their employees are sick of the congestion, the traffic, the noise, the craziness, right? And I understand that if you're a local that's just trying to put in their 9 to 5, you won't want to fight the drunk tourists to do it. So a lot of those large office users are actually moving to Music Row, right? That's where they're being poached by new construction or near new construction in Music Row, and I think that's a trend that we can expect to continue. I think ultimately the Broadway area is going to be completely devoted to tourist type uses, and the more traditional office users are going to find their way out of there, right? Now, let's talk about a kind of a weird topic, just to make this a little less business-like and a little bit more casual. One of the things I've been thinking a lot about in my personal life is this idea of karma, right? And perhaps how karma interfaces with our subconscious mind, right? So first I want to define for you what karma is, right? This is a Hinduist and Buddhist idea, right? Which simply means the sum of a person's actions in this and previous states of existence are viewed as deciding their fate in future existences, right? So a lot going on there. The previous states of existence is an interesting thing, but beyond that, let's not focus on that for right now, because I can see how one would object to that idea that we've had previous states of existence. Our soul has had previous states of existence and will have future states of existence. Why don't we leave that out for now and just say the sum of a person's actions decide their fate in the future, right? And this is something that I've really leaned into as I've gotten older. I'm 42 years old. I haven't always been a spiritual person, kind of young and dumb, and thought I knew better than to, perhaps follow the classical teachings of Christianity. I'll tell you that we go to church. My children are being raised Christian, so don't get me wrong. But as I was coming up, I thought I was kind of too smart to participate in traditional Christianity, if you will, right? I'm totally open-minded to all religions, all spirituality. I think a spiritual person is a better person than someone that claims to be an atheist and have no spiritual beliefs. And I think I see that in my life experience that has played itself out. That being said, this idea of karma, that if you do good, and I think about it like harvesting karma, right? Whereby I'm doing good things in my life for people that perhaps can't do anything for me, right? Or I'm doing good things when no one is looking, right? Whereby I'm never going to get external credit for those decisions, right? But I'm still doing them with the idea that I'm harvesting this karma that ultimately will pay itself back. And if you want to get even weirder with it, I actually am motivated by the idea that if I personally harvest this karma throughout my life, perhaps I can even bestow it on my children. And, it dawns on me that perhaps, again, stick with me, and I'll finish this in a second if I'm losing you here. It dawns on me that perhaps a third party spiritual being doesn't even need to be involved for this to be true, right? If you factor in the subconscious mind and how powerful it is, that's one of these things where I don't think we have full appreciation for the power of the subconscious mind. Let me give you an example. If you were to wake up every morning and in a disciplined way say to yourself, even aloud or think it or manifest it, today is going to be a great day. I am thankful for another day on this planet with the people that I love. The sun is shining. I am healthy, and today is going to be a great day. And if you contrast that with someone that rolls out of bed and says, oh my God, today is going to be terrible. I've got to do this, this, and this. We don't have enough cash in the bank. Anxiety. Today is going to be terrible. The person that wakes up in the morning and manifests a positive day is much more likely to have a positive day. And the person that wakes up in the morning and manifests a negative day is much more likely to have a negative day. It's fact, right? And the reason is our subconscious mind is choosing that perspective the rest of the day. And I would argue that most of modern man's problems are actually an issue of perspective, right? So as I wrap this up, perhaps if you view your life as one big opportunity to harvest karma that will pay itself back in some way in the future, your subconscious mind is observing all of these kind and generous acts that you are committing. And perhaps it is self-fulfilling in that you live a better, more prosperous life because of it, right? So without even a third-party spiritual being involved, if one commits themselves to harvesting karma throughout their life, doing good things even for people that can't repay you, doing good things for when people aren't looking, and your subconscious mind is monitoring all of these decisions you're making, I wonder if that person doesn't have a healthier, happier, more prosperous existence for having done it due to the subconscious mind. And then if there is a third-party spiritual being involved, you've got that as well to fall back on. But I'm not sure it's necessary. And this is just an idea I'm kind of fleshing out. So I'm not really pitching you on a specific idea here. But as I get older, I really do think a lot about karma and its benefits and it being the proper way for an honorable person, a good person, to carry themselves throughout life. So I challenge you to think about how much karma you are harvesting in a daily basis and whether or not there's room for improvement there. Okay? Let's move on to the next topic, the breakup of the United States of America. So we're going to go from this very positive, uplifting thing to this very kind of scary and weird idea. There's a movie out in theaters right now called Civil War that I very much want to see. But it's been on the topic of people, right? Our country, the United States of America, our union of states, a union of 50 states that have agreed to unite under a set of rules called the Constitution, right? Are being tested, right? I don't think there's ever been a bigger divide between what's happening in blue states and in red states, right? And we've had a blue president for the last 3.5 years, and we've watched that blue president run our otherwise prosperous, free nation, the beacon of freedom in this world. We've watched him run it into the ground, right? in really a shocking way. Almost all of the problems that have been caused in the last 3.5 years were unavoidable. But unfortunately, they are ideological, right? The Democrats have this utopian view of what the United States should be. It's not rooted in logic. It's not rooted in any type of history. There's no other place on earth that's been able to perform this utopian existence. And it's really jeopardizing the future prosperity of our Union of States. And I think more people are waking up to that idea than ever before. And more people are thinking through what a national divorce would look like. And I would like to just simply present that it is possible to do this, to dissolve our Union of States without killing each other, right? And a great example of this is England exiting their union, right? Their European Union, which isn't an apples to apples comparison, but it still tells the story. Not a single person was murdered for England to leave the European Union. It was a long, painful, drawn-out negotiation, right? And neither side got what they wanted, which is the outcome of most high-level negotiations. I would suggest that if we do not right this ship, right, the red states who have different value system than the blue states do are not going to ride the ship below water. At some point, the red states are going to unite and say, we're getting off the ship. If you want to go down with the ship, you feel free. We are bailing out before this ship sinks. We're going to do our own thing. And we may even have our own currency because our elected leaders, in their infinite wisdom, are really doing damage to our currency. They're really doing damage to our ability to borrow money in the world with the excessive debt and with no plan whatsoever to correct it, right? Our ship is sinking. More people are waking up to it. I think depending on how this election goes, if it really goes sideways, I think we're going to start talking at a state level about exiting our current Union of States and what that negotiation would look like. So I think we need to get away from this idea that we're going to fight with weapons. And I think we need to get on board with the idea that if the red states unite, there is a negotiation to be made here, that we could separate ourselves from the current Union of States and have a much more prosperous future for having done it. So just be on the lookout for that, depending on how the end of the year goes. All right, let's keep moving. Did you know restaurants are down 30% year over year, with tourist-driven restaurants doing the worst? The problem is consumers are tapped out. We are out of money, right? Our savings are gone. Our credit cards are nearly maxed out. Everything got more expensive. And there really doesn't seem to be any relief on the horizon. So when you get tapped out as a consumer, what do you pull back on? You pull back on vacations. You pull back on eating out. So it's kind of a double whammy for restaurants in Nashville right now. The locals are pulling back on eating out, and people are choosing to travel less. So those tourist-driven restaurants are getting hit even worse. And I know that if you talk to restaurateurs in the Nashville area, they're planning to hunker down for the next 6 to 12 months. Just try to get through it. That's how bleak things have gotten. So if you want to get into the most difficult business absolutely possible, try to get into the restaurant business. Every aspect of that business is impossible. And now you've got the geniuses at the federal level ruining the economy for those folks, which is completely out of their control. So have respect for anyone that tries to get into the restaurant business, because it is a gauntlet to make it through, to survive. And even in good times, it's a difficult business. When the economy is on a downward trend, which it absolutely is right now, which I'm seeing in my own business, it is a very, very difficult business to be in. So I'm really pulling for the restaurants in and around Nashville. I hope they all make it through. Along with that same topic, consumer confidence, right? Consumer confidence has dropped to a 6-month low. What's causing that? Well, the obvious things are causing that. Inflation, interest rates, employment, all moving in the wrong direction. Everything. Not that the average Joe is really studying the statistics, which are, in my opinion, hard to believe in the first place. I think they're manipulated greatly, right? I don't think we're getting the real information. We're getting watered down information that kind of helps tell a political story more than it tells us the financial reality of the situation. Consumer confidence is down because they're out of money, right? And one other thought on that topic, Aldi and McDonald's, right? These are the low-cost providers of food, are just coming out and saying, hey, we outpriced our customer base and we are agreeing to lower our prices across the board, right? Aldi and McDonald's outpriced their customers. That's where we are right now. To the extent that McDonald's, for example, is coming out with a $5 meal. You get either a McDouble or a McChicken, plus 4 nuggets, plus fries and a drink for $5. They're trying to bring that low-income consumer back because they can't even afford McDonald's. They can't even afford Aldi. That is where we're at. Aldi and McDonald's are cutting prices because they outpriced the consumer. I don't think a lot of people have a real respect for the difficulty that the average person faces, because the average person isn't trying to be honest about it, right? Everybody's trying to keep up with the Joneses, keep up their appearances, ride it out, get through it. No one is being honest that they're living from paycheck to paycheck. But I think that's the reality of our current situation. Now, lastly, we're going to finish today's show with more talk about the so-called transit plan. And the point I'm going to make in today's show, I think it is more aptly described as the transit welfare plan, right? And let me explain that to you. So in November, we're going to be voting on a 0.5% increase in the local sales tax to fund a dedicated transit budget, right? So if you look at the 50 largest metro areas, 46 have dedicated transit funding, right? Only 4 do not. Nashville is one of the 4 that do not. So I would argue that it would be good to have dedicated transit funding to improve our roadways, to improve our intersections, to constantly be improving our congestion on our roads, right? The quality of our roads, cut down on the congestion, make it easier for people to get to point A to point B, especially during rush hour, right? I think you could argue that an increase in the local sales tax to fund transit would be a wise thing to do to improve the quality of our roadways, right? But that's not what's happening here, right? What they want is a transit welfare plan that's spending the bulk of the billions they plan to spend on a bus system. A bus system that I don't know who's going to ride. I mean, are we trying to cater to people that currently ride the bus? Are we thinking that if we spend billions of dollars on a rapid 24/7 bus system, that people that currently drive from their house to their work are going to drive from their house to a bus stop, somehow park there, wait for the bus, ride the bus to another bus stop, and then walk from there to their office? Is that what we expect people to do? I think that's unrealistic. right? So in my opinion, the plan that's been presented as a transit plan is going to do nothing to improve our roadways or improve our congestion situation during rush hour. We're spending $3 billion on transit and not fixing the problem. So unfortunately for me, fortunately for all of us, I would vote no on this transit plan, just as voters have done for the last 20 years. They've been trying to get a transit plan approved in this city for 20 years, and every year they get it wrong. And this year, the strategy is cut it back, right? A smaller sales tax increase for a smaller scope of work. I think they perhaps got the smaller sales tax increase right, but they got the wrong scope of work. This is a transit welfare plan for people who ride buses. The people that are going to work every day would prefer to drive their car from their house to their work, not have all of this extra steps in between, right? So I just don't see how this solves any problems. This is more welfare, right? So you're getting a 0.5% sales tax increase that's going to fund more welfare. And I am totally opposed to that idea. And what they're trying to do is convince people that, oh, there is something in this package that is going to improve congestion on our roadways. We're going to give you 600 remote controlled traffic lights, where some Joe Schmo is going to be sitting in some government office somewhere manually manipulating traffic lights. 600. We have a massive city in terms of size, right? 600 traffic lights is nothing. And the idea that we're going to have some government employee sitting in some closet somewhere clicking buttons and that's going to solve our problem is absolute insanity. That's the bone that they are throwing to the traditional worker that is driving from point A to point B. Oh, by the way, there's something for you here. 600 remote controlled traffic lights. Really? That's what we get for $3 billion. We get 600 remote controlled traffic lights. It's a joke. It's a slap in the face. And I hope the Nashville voter has enough sense to vote this down, knowing that there's big money behind getting this approved. There's going to be millions of dollars in advertising purchased prior to this vote to try to get you to vote yes for this $3 billion bus monstrosity, a bus welfare plan. And I hope the people have the good sense to see through it. Well, y'all, that's going to round out today's show. I appreciate you all so much for tuning in. We'll be back to you next week with more Nashville news. Until then, have a great week. We'll talk to you next week.